Hogwarts Legacy is an immersive, open-world action RPG set in the world first introduced in the Harry Potter books. Now you can take control of the action and be at the centre of your own adventure in the wizarding world. Embark on a journey through familiar and new locations as you explore and discover fantastic beasts, customise your character and craft potions, master spellcasting, upgrade talents, and become the wizard you want to be. In this video, we go over everything we know so far about Hogwarts Legacy. With that being said, I ask that you like and subscribe with post notifications on if you do go on to enjoy the video. Let's jump into it. As you heard in the intro, Hogwarts Legacy is an open world RPG set in the Harry Potter or wizarding world. More to the point, as reported in many leaks and finally confirmed in the official announcement trailer, the game is set in the late 1800s. This could place the game, at least the starting point, in any year from 1870 to 1899. This time in the wizarding world was quite interesting. It featured the rise of a few significant characters in the world. Some examples being of course Albus Dumbledore, his brother Aberforth, Gellert Grindelwald, and even our boy Sirius's great-great-grandfather Phineas Nigellus Black, who after attending the titular school of witchcraft and wizardry returned to the castle as a professor and eventual headmaster. He is known as the least popular headmaster Hogwarts ever had, according to his great-great-grandson. Depending on the exact time period we see in the game, we could have Phineas as our headmaster, or, perhaps more likely after the announcement trailer, one of our professors. Now from what I understand, it's believed by most that Phineas was a potions professor, and this lad, who is clearly the potions professor, bears a striking resemblance to Sirius Black, and from what we know of Phineas's appearance, it lines up. Dark hair, dark eyes, clever looking? Maybe. Pointed beard? Not really, but we move on. I'm willing to go out on a limb here and say that that is absolutely Phineas, and I imagine depending on your lineage, he could become a mentor figure for the player. Also, it's worth mentioning that it's quite possible that Albus will be featured in the game, most likely as a first year in 92, while our character begins their education in 5th year. Should this be the case, I can see him being a companion or maybe even a rival to our character. Getting into the nitty gritty of the game, here's what we know about the story, straight from the Hogwarts Legacy website. Experience Hogwarts in the 1800s. Your character is a student who holds the key to an ancient secret that threatens to tear the wizarding world apart. You have received a late acceptance to the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and soon discover that you are no ordinary student. You possess an unusual ability to perceive and master ancient magic. Only you can decide if you will protect this secret for the good of all, or yield to the temptation of more sinister magic. Discover the feeling of living at Hogwarts as you make allies, battle dark wizards, and ultimately decide the fate of the wizarding world. Your legacy is what you make of it. So, what do we get from that? For one, there's going to be some form of an alliance system, and with it being rumoured before that this game makes use of the Nemesis system created for the Shadow of Mordor games, I'm willing to bet this is some variation of that, featuring not only our allies but also rivals. Our character is a student that joins Hogwarts late, and seemingly has access to a powerful magic of some sort that no one else has. Powerful, but I think dangerous is the key there. As for the late acceptance, whether this means we get transferred from another magic school or we develop our powers much later than your average witch or wizard, I'm not sure. The latter is perhaps more likely since the website mentions that we only discover this unique power we have upon arriving at Hogwarts. This kind of creates a weird sort of problem though. If we are the equivalent of a late bloomer in the wizarding world, why is that the case? That just doesn't ever really happen, and why didn't the Ministry, for example, pick up on it way sooner? I'm sure they'll come up with some plot point to explain that, but it's interesting to speculate on. Speaking of speculation, I've just thought of something as I'm writing this. If it's the case that we don't discover the ancient power we possess until we reach Hogwarts, maybe that has something to do with Hogwarts itself. Maybe, just maybe, we're a secret descendant of one of the Hogwarts founders, and the school reacts to our presence by like opening some secret passageway or something, you know? And that's how we find out about it. The name of the game would make sense then, wouldn't it? We are the legacy of Hogwarts. Tell me that doesn't sound fire as fuck. You can't. Before we move on to the world and gameplay aspect, I'd like to point out something that I haven't really seen many people talk about. This guy is definitely not the main villain of the game like many people are assuming. How do I know this? Well, we see him get his ass beat in the trailer, so that pretty much rules him out. What's more likely, I think, is that he is one of many boss type enemies that will be in the game. The sort of proto Death Eaters, if you will. Oh god, I'm getting Assassin's Creed flashbacks. Shit, let's move on before I intervene. Haha, I lied, not moving on just yet. On the villain subject, I'm predicting that this cheeky gamer in the cloak is actually our villain. I could be wrong, but who knows, we'll see. Alright, so onto the gameplay and world. We know that it's an open world game, but I'm expecting a bit more of a hub based world similar to God of War. Like, we obviously have Hogwarts and the surrounding area as our main world, the Midgard or Lake of Nine to use a God of War example, but then we also have Hogsmeade, Diagon and Nocturne Alley, some coastal area that I'm unsure of, and even the Ministry too if some of the leaks are to be believed and we end up as an Auror in the endgame. And I believe these areas will be separate worlds we can travel to and explore like your different realms and that in God of War. The other genre in which this game places itself is the RPG genre. Because of this, I expect each of the separate areas to have their own quest lines and characters that maybe link back to Hogwarts in some way. On top of this, I imagine there'll be some form of a leveling system and skill tree where you unlock progressively difficult magic and abilities that will maybe have some bearing on which areas of the world you should be visiting. Although I'm not a fan of level gating at all, so ideally that wouldn't be a part of the game. Instead, it should be based on the narrative, you know? Like you go to Hogsmeade, for example, specifically to progress the story and not just to do your typical fetch quest. It just works better for the pacing and structuring of a game, in my opinion. Now, as for the base gameplay mechanics of the game, it's been reported that the combat is very much one of strategy and timing, a sort of Souls game meets Harry Potter, as opposed to the more simplified combat found in the older games.
Coconut.
I for one am very glad of this. I always love a good in-depth combat system, and in a world where spell casting has to be learnt and precise in order to be effective, it only makes sense that you have a system like this. We can see a wee sneak peek of this in the trailer. It shows our character dueling one of these skull mask dudes I mentioned earlier, and even in this short clip it's evident that they're each going blow for blow, firing and deflecting each spell as it comes, and it's great to see. As for the world we inhabit in the game, I expect it to be filled with your average NPCs giving out side quests and such, but I believe there will be a variety of activities we can take part in too, such as, but not limited to, Quidditch, Exploding Snap, or even the Wizarding School Potions Championship, which was quite popular at the time in the wizarding world. We see two students gearing up for Quidditch in the trailer, which confirms that if anyone was somehow in doubt of its presence, and I really hope Quidditch is a really in-depth part of the game that we can actually invest in with whichever house's particular team. It would be great if that could link into house points and the house cup at the end of each year too. Also, I am begging Avalanche to let us be able to fly around the grounds on our brooms outside of Quidditch. It's something that I've wanted for ages and felt was the missing piece in a lot of the older Harry Potter games. But aside from that, we'll be getting a class system too. No, not like that. A class system similar to the classic game Bully, or if you're a European gamer, Canis Canem Edit, where you go in, learn, enhance your abilities and level yourself up essentially. I wonder too if there'll be that choice of whether or not to attend class and what consequences or bonuses will come from that. Like say you don't go to class for like a month or something, you cost your house a certain amount of house points which would cause your classmates to react differently to you. That could be really cool. Speaking of your house, according to early leaks, decisions you make in your character creation suite will directly influence which house you get sorted into, which is quite an interesting way to do it. It would be neat if you could maybe link your Pottermore account and have your house wand and Patronus loaded up and ready to go. The thought occurred to me also that maybe they'll give you a chance to speak to the Sorting Hat as it's being placed on you, because as we know, the hat does take into account what the young witch or wizard wants and which house they desire to be put into, so that could be interesting. Either way, I'm very excited for whatever way they decide to approach it. You know what I'm not excited about though? The fact that to me, this game is almost certainly not coming out in 2022 as expected. The studio is constantly hiring new staff members for things as important as mocap leads, which for a game supposedly coming out next year, you would expect this to be long done. Maybe the delay from 2021 to 2022 was them saying, hey, we need more time on this and we're going to switch things up and go a slightly different direction or something like that. which would explain a lot of the hirings. But even at that, the earliest I can see this game releasing is late 2022 or early 2023. I would love nothing more than to be proven wrong here and have it come out early to mid next year in perfect condition, but I think it's very important for games to come out when they're actually finished and ready to be published. Look what's happened with Cyberpunk and the effect that's had on CD Projekt Red as a whole. We do not want a repeat of that. Now with E3 right around the corner, it's very likely that we'll get an update on Hogwarts Legacy, as it's already been confirmed that WB Games will be taking part in the event in some form. But until then, I've been Ben, and I sincerely hope you enjoyed. I'll see you all next time. Peace.